I was given the manuscript for this by Andy Weir to both be in it and to produce, but I was given it at, I mean, really that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I loved The Martian, but nothing could prepare me for this journey I was about to go on, and just how incredible this book is. And it's so fun now because this book is so beloved by so many people. They're so fiercely protective of it. I've never worked on something where I'm so confident that the story and the characters are great and that the audience is going to love it, because it's already been stress tested by the audience of book readers, and it's so beloved. So it's just really, I just knew if we could stay true to the book, that we would make a great film. My first thought was like, I needed to get a better producer than me involved, because this was sort of seemingly impossible. So I needed the best. And I knew that Amy Pascal loomed large in her legend. She'd made Little Women and Spider-Man. And if you can do that, you can do anything. So I approached her and asked her if she would produce this with me. And I was so lucky that she said yes. And then the next thought was, who can direct this? And there really was no question in my mind. It had to be Chris and Phil. They had to direct this. There was no one else for me that could do this. So I reached out to them, and they loved the book as well, and we all joined forces to start to make the impossible possible. There's so much about this book that made me want to make it into a film. It's such an epic journey. It's a journey that you, only through the experience of this film, it's an experience you will never have, probably, unless with this book or with this film. I mean, the idea that you start on Earth and you go to another galaxy and you make friends with an alien and you save the world is just too fun to pass up. And on top of it, there just were so many incredible layers to it, and just really hopeful. I mean, even though it is about the sun dying, it's hopeful in the sense that it supports this idea and believes in this idea that we're capable of anything, no matter how bleak it seems, that as long as you don't give up hope, that really anything is possible and miracles are possible. The setup is that this character, Ryland Grace, wakes up in space with no memory. And he slowly regains his memories, and he realizes that the reason he's there is that the sun is dying. And then an alien shows up who's also trying to save the sun. And they form this incredible friendship as they each try to save their home worlds, just by believing that, you know, the impossible is possible. Ryland Grace is a middle school teacher who used to be in academia, but lost his career. He lost his ambition, I think, but he still believes that he's right. And he's just exceptionally smart, but still very relatable. You know, even though he's brilliant, he reacts to everything, I think, as most of us would. He's not stoic in any way. He's not your typical hero in any way. He's not yeah, brave in any traditional sense. He doesn't have any illusions about being a hero, and he's quite fearful, and I think realistically fearful, and I think that makes him such a fun person to go on this extraordinary journey with, because he reacts to every terrifying thing with the same amount of horror that we might, but he somehow manages to not let his fear rule him, and he just keeps trying. Sandra Hüller was another person where I just couldn't imagine anyone else but her. And when we were casting the movie, it was like award season, and so I kept seeing Sandra at all of these places, and I just thought it would be a dream to work with this person. I loved her work so much, but also just, she had this, warmth to her, even though she could also play, very, the strong silent type. But there was just this warmth that was undeniable, and she was just this incredible, very special balance of both. And so, again, it was one of those things where when she agreed to do the movie, I couldn't imagine it any other way. It was such a joy to work with her. It just was like that. It was from the first scene, it was fun, and it was fun until the end. And she's the other heart of the film. The scenes with Lionel were so fun. I mean, they were too fun. It's like, that also then became the best part of the movie. And just going to Home Depot with Lionel was so fun. It was supposed to be a quick scene where we get some things and we go back to the science, and we ended up, we're bowling in the aisles, and we're stealing all the Skittles. We were at one point riding the forklift around, and the scene just took on a life of their own. And again, there's just no one else who could have played that role, and it just was such a joy to work with him. He brings so much to the film. I don't think Charlie Wood, our production designer, ever really accepted that this was just pretend. These sets were so realistic, it was a problem. They were too real. I think he was just wanted to be prepared in case at some point we said, actually, Charlie, we need to go to space for a few shots, that he would be like, yeah, I got this. You're covered. The spaces were so realistic, and the way that the sets moved was so realistic. The engineering of them was genius. And not like a set in the sense that, like, if you needed to move the camera, we needed to get wires in because I needed to float. Nothing moved. Like, you had to saw the set in half and then weld it back together. It was just so incredibly realistic that it really set a bar for all of us when we got to the sets, where we thought, okay, we have to commit to this film and to our respective roles with as much creativity and as seriously as Charlie Wood committed to these locations. Drew Goddard, again, another person where it couldn't be anyone else. There's just no one else could write the screenplay. He had already written the screenplay for The Martian. He already had this relationship with Andy. Andy has such a unique voice. And he's a brilliant guy, but also, like, uniquely funny, just in the same way that Andy was. And, just the perfect fit. So again, it's like the chemistry between the two of them, the chemistry he had with the material, with the guys, with me, his ability to adapt this odyssey and not have it feel like you were shortchanged in any way, to synthesize all these elements. Just, there's no one else that could have written the screenplay other than him. Andy's so special because he really leans into the science part of science fiction. And he's such a brilliant writer and mind, and you get to wear the brain of this brilliant person. And I swear, like, I can't prove this, but that, like, your neural pathways get changed, you develop new ones just through thinking through the problems that are presented to you as he would deal with them. I think it's sort of like this really, like, awe-inspiring, hopeful, kind of life-affirming experience that some movies can give you. And I think the film, and we know that the book delivers on that. The book is so beloved by so many. The fans of the book are so focused on how we handled this material. They're very cautiously optimistic because they want it to work. But they love these characters so much that it's like a very special book in that way. A lot of people describe this as the best book they've ever read, and are very emotional about the fact that it's being made into a film. So I feel a lot of responsibility to them, but I also feel really encouraged because we did stay very close to the spirit of the book and the details of the book. And having seen the film with a lot of audiences now, I just know that people will love these characters and love this once in a lifetime journey that they get to go on. I've had the opportunity to work with astronauts who have been to space, been to the moon, and they all have these, like, when they come back, they all have these really profound experiences that they so, like, desperately want to share and feel so lucky to have had. But it creates a context for them that they feel is important to share and that we would all benefit from having. So I do think, and this isn't shilling for IMAX, I do think that the size of this screen and the scope in which this film operates and the cinematography of Greg Fraser and the epicness of the journey and the fact that you go to another galaxy and you see other planets and you touch the stars. It does feel, it has been for me, I think, a kind of transformative experience, and I believe it will be for others who see it. You know, the movie it's epic. So the only way to really experience the epic nature of it and the scale of it and the scope of it is on a big screen. I mean, it's about the cosmos. The beauty of it is that if you have that experience, you know, you experience the cosmos in this by probably the most. That's as close as most of us will ever get. I just think that it's so hard to grasp our place in the universe, and it's so easy to just shut down to the idea, and you know, occasionally you get these images like the pale blue dot from Sagan, or you get you know, images from the ISS, where you're reminded of it, but it's so easy to forget, and it's such a powerful experience. The concept of a Hail Mary is, I think, you know, it's most commonly used now, I think, is a football term, which is, but it's also, I think, in any sport, it's like a Hail Mary pass. It's that pass when the clock has run out and you're at the other side of the court and you just throw the ball. It's a Hail Mary. It's the last-ditch effort when everything else has failed. It's when there is no hope, but you still are not hopeless. It's that effort. It's that belief that miracles are possible. There's a special place in hell for harnesses and wire work. Nothing has ever been more different than how it looks. Like the way that it feels to be in a harness, however it looks, imagine the opposite. It's uniquely challenging and yes, feels incredibly ungraceful and labored and false. Yet, when you look at it, it seems as though it's the total opposites. Grace is not an astronaut, so he doesn't know how to behave in zero G, and so it's all just very difficult for him, which worked for me because it was very difficult for me. So I was able to connect with him on that level. And we tried to create, at certain points, almost like we watched Chaplin's Modern Times to sort of try and create sequences that were both like a terrible dance routine that felt like balletic, but also just like complete failure after failure. That because it felt like that was a way we'd never seen zero G as well, and would, might be more realistic for someone that hadn't trained to be out there. We had some real astronauts on set, and they came during this one of the scenes that I'm referencing, where I'm just kind of going tail over tea kettle, bumping into things, like just it was very ridiculous, but it felt like it might be truthful, and I was a little bit cautious to see what they would think of it, and they were like, it's kind of what it's like. That it's often presented in this very elegant way, but oftentimes they were saying you get so many bumps and bruises because you just forget and you're all over the place and there is no up and down, and in reality it's not like a ballet at all. Eunice was our stunt coordinator, and just what a gem of a human being, and she just instantly becomes one of your favorite people you've ever met, and such an incredible work ethic, sense of humor, unique mind, really wanted this to feel authentic, but also like a kind of stunts and zero G that you've never seen. So she just was relentlessly after it feeling authentic, but also feeling authentic in a way that we had never seen. And she choreographed these incredible sequences that were at times like Charlie Chaplin-esque, that but on wires, and that were beautiful and then fell apart, and then she would construct something beautiful and then she would deconstruct it, and all the while never wanting it to just feel like for entertainment's sake, just trying to find the realistic, truthful way for it to be entertaining. And I just found her a constant inspiration, and again, no one else could have done this film. This film would not be what it is if Eunice hadn't been our stunt coordinator. Rocky is from a planet called Arid. He's a Eurydian, and he's completely different from Grace in almost every way. He lives in a completely different atmosphere. He has no discernible face, although I would say eventually, after spending a lot of time with him, I could see that he had different faces. He's a rock-like spider. Not a spider, he's spider-like. He speaks in song. He doesn't see in the same way that we do. He uses echolocation. He eats in a very disturbing way. He's quite proud of, but I'm not sure why. And when he sleeps, he needs to be watched, because when they sleep, they sort of go into this suspended form of animation. It's almost like they could die and never wake up if someone doesn't watch them sleep. And he's just easy to fall in love with. I knew there was no way that I could do it without Chris and Phil. I think they are so unique as filmmakers. it also comes from their collaboration. So this film is about collaboration. They have such a unique way of finding humor in dark and bleak places. They make things that shouldn't work, and they love things to be hard. Everything that they've done is really hard, and I knew that that they would really be excited by how difficult this was going to be, and in fact, not only were they game, but they wanted to make it more difficult, and that's exactly what it needed. Grace builds a program so that they can learn each other's language. He pieces together this laptop, tablet communication device where he records the sounds that Rocky makes. They first agree on math and measurement, and then he sort of uses that as a way to sort of find words, and then he starts clocking the words, and then eventually they develop language. Well, they're both there for the same reason, and they are both alone in space, and they both lost their crew. They're both deeply curious. They share their cultures with each other, and they talk about their lives back home. Grace shows Rocky Earth in this simulation room that he has on the ship, and so he's able to sort of share some of play the hits of Earth and try and educate Rocky on his home, and Rocky does his best to kind of describe arid, but it's not as easy for Grace to visualize. Grace's first interaction with Rocky, or at least Rocky's ship, is first one of complete awe. It's so awe-inspiring, the way that the ship is realized, described in the book, but also realized in the movie, is truly like nothing you've ever seen. And he's just appropriately in awe of that. And then it occurs to him that it's an alien spaceship. And first, he's alone in space, and he's resigned himself to the fact that he's going to die alone in space. So at first, there's this burst of hope that a spaceship has arrived and he's not alone. And then he realizes that he's not alone, but whatever's in there is not human. And then, of course, I'm sure every alien movie he's ever seen of like an alien coming out of your chest or wanting to live inside of you just rolls through his head, and he just becomes immediately terrified and then tries to get away from it. Yeah, their friendship it's the heart of the movie. I think connection can give you a reason to be brave. At first, Grace doesn't really have a reason to be brave, at least not for himself, and his connection with Rocky does that, and it just gives a kind of meaning to his existence. It's becomes everything to him, and it's what they both begin to try and save. The movie is funny. The friendship between Rocky and Grace is full of humor and sort of strange banter, and this laughter is a counterbalance to how high stakes it is and how dire the circumstances are. They're like the odd couple in a lot of ways, and it's the trying to connect, and it just becomes, at a certain point, yes, he's completely alien and everything he does is different, but they start fighting and bickering and connecting in ways that I think you will relate to, as like the same way you do with your own best friend.
I wanted to play Eva Straat because I'm not so familiar with playing people in power. That was a completely new form of character for me, that there is somebody who's just doing her job in a very good way, who has the respect of everybody and who is leading the way in a lot of things, who has a lot of patience and courage and humor and heart. And I wanted to try to create this sort of energy. I thought it would be a lot of fun. And of course, I wanted to play with Ryan.
I was alone on camera for many months. And so once we got to the Rocky portion of the story, I was like very relieved to start to have company and someone to work with. His friendship with Rocky is so hard-earned, and communication is impossible, and just Rocky, in order to be in his atmosphere, has to create this device in which he can be in the space. I have to say I'm so grateful to James Ortiz, because no matter what was going wrong in that practical way, James was always there in my ear in an earwig, sort of as Rocky's voice. And when things were breaking down or not working, or I was in a harness and in a spacesuit for hours and waiting for something to be fixed or whatever it was, James and I would just talk. And so he really did become, that voice for me, like Rocky was for Grace.
We see her as the head of the chair of the Petrova task force, who is building the spaceship to go to Tadstedi to find out why it is not infected by the astrophage. Well, the Petrova task force is a group of scientists from all over the world who gather to solve this problem of the astrophage eating the energy of the sun and to save the Earth. Grace is a scientist who has been dismissed by the science community, but she thinks that he is the right person for this job. Ryland Grace is played by Ryan Gosling, and it's a real joy and pleasure to just watch his process. It's really incredible to me to see him working, and he is so fast in his brain and so warm in his personality, so serious in everything that he is doing, so dedicated to the project, that it just astonishes me every day. I met Chris and Phil in London. It was a long, interesting, funny conversation. And I had known their work before, and I was so happy that they asked me to be a part of it. And the work with them is, again, a real pleasure. They work without pressure of any sorts. It's very, very playful. They're very fast in inventing new things. I met Andy Weir in London in the studio as well. It was supposed to be a quick hello, just to meet each other, and we ended up in a 1-hour conversation about life. And I'm very happy that we did that. He's an extraordinary person, I think, and an extraordinary writer, of course. He told me some things about Straat that I wouldn't have thought in this way. The script is very intelligent, it's very adventurous, very moving. That's what I thought from the beginning, and funny. So there are a lot of ingredients that make a really good film, and because it's about a lot of things, not only about people, also about science and the Earth and the universe and what it takes to do things that you don't see coming and that you don't think you're capable of. I think this film, as I said in the beginning, it combines a lot of things. I think it will be very entertaining. It is very funny, very moving also, and I think you will see like pictures that you might not have seen before. It is a very human story that is told here, and I think people can, of course, through Ryan, connect very much to Ryland Grace and ask themselves the question that he is asking himself. It's a film about friendship, but also about science, about the Earth and what we can do to continue living on Earth, or even to let Earth to let it exist longer. And that has, of course, to do with our lives today. In our case, it's about the sun dying, getting colder. We live in a world now where everything becomes hotter and hotter, and there are many things we can do to stop that. And we see a person who gives his life to stop that process in that story. And I think it kind of reflects on all of us.
This is a film about an alien and an astronaut who become very, very close friends. And through their friendship and through their connection and their bond, they end up saving the world, which, you know, doesn't happen every day. I got word that they wanted to play this alien character, not CGI, but as a puppet. And I went, that's pretty crazy. So one thing led to another, and I had a lovely meeting with Phil and Chris, and we had a great chat about this film, and it was really, really fun. And 30 minutes later, I got a phone call that said, hey, would you like to be an alien in a movie? And I went, I'm an alien most of the time, so let's do it for other people now. But that's basically how it happened. More than half of the film, Rocky's in a scene with Ryan, and he has to have a full gamut of expression. And how do you do that on a character that doesn't have a face, has 5 legs, and is sort of the silhouette of some cryptid spider, right? And you kind of want to avoid all of that because the character on the page is this endearing friend, and we have to fall in love with him. And I think one of the things I learned on this is the fact that follow your instinct and trust and lean in, and the scene can work even better. So you end up kind of creating something that you would never have expected. And that's sort of been the theme of this whole project. It's never what you can possibly expect. And what you get is something more heartful, more emotional, more beautiful. Rocky is an alien from a faraway galaxy. He has 5 legs, no face. He communicates in echolocation. He has a genius-level intellect. He is an inventor and an engineer. But I think on the inside, he's this genetic splice of a miserly old man, a very peppy Labrador, and a deeply anxious 14-year-old boy. So the fun of Rocky is playing all of those things, which I get to do every day, which is pretty crazy. I definitely felt some pressure playing Rocky. It doesn't take very long and sort of 4 minutes on the internet to go, oh, there's a lot of love for this character. So I didn't want to mess it up. I really wanted to honor him. You kind of need to be present and play the scene and find out what this relationship is versus doing sort of a book report of what you know the book is. I think the biggest gift of this whole project is the fact that I didn't realize how much range Rocky has on the page. You know, he is actually every instrument in the orchestra, and he has a lot of sadness and a lot of joy and a lot of anger. Most of our relationship is sort of like 2 brothers that are just arguing and loving each other and trying to understand each other. And it's a lovely sort of testament to the art form of puppetry that, like, we can, you know, it works and there's value in it, and you can create some really special magic on set. I think the reason my fans are going to fall in love with Rocky is the reason that I fell in love with Rocky, in that he is this completely unprotected, unadorned person. He doesn't have he doesn't have an awareness of social norms. He doesn't have an awareness of things that maybe he shouldn't say out loud. So he's just this sort of open person that just says what he's thinking, and that does create friction and also creates a lot of comic opportunities. But I think people are going to love him because he's so lovable. You know, he's this sweetie pie that's doing his best and has been through a lot.
It's important that Grace be really relatable, because the reader, or in this case the viewer, has to really root for the protagonist, especially in sort of a one-man show like this. If you don't root for the protagonist, you're not going to like the story. So it was really important to me to make Grace likable and someone you could relate with.
Sure, Rocky is an alien and Grace is a human, and they have different experiences, but I think what makes their relationship really interesting is the fact that they actually both have very similar traumas that they're both immediately responding to. They both have a very similar relationship to their own ability and their own skills. They're both geniuses, but they don't believe that they are. And they both have this mission to right a wrong and make something better. But I think, what they really want is to just be near somebody that understands them. So again, it's this magical mixture of the soft-hearted and the big and broad and heroic, and it's really beautiful.
Once Ryan Gosling was interested in being involved in the project, obviously everybody was thrilled. So it was less of a oh, let's sit around and think about this kind of thing, and more of a oh, well, yeah, okay, that's cool, yes. I think Ryan is nailing the role. I'm just so happy about it. I think as a writer, one of my biggest weaknesses is character depth and complexity. And I try my best, but I do acknowledge that I'm much more plot than character. And Ryan brings a lot of depth and character to Grace that I never even thought of. So it's like he's revealing what Grace was all along to me, and it's fantastic. The whole story is basically a story of friendship. Two people meeting up in dire circumstances, both of them desperate to save their entire species, and they end up working together and becoming best friends.
Most of the time when he's on the Hail Mary, he's causing a great deal of havoc because he's just like a kid in a candy shop. He wants to see everything and learn everything and know what it is. So yeah, that may explain me pushing a ball around and breaking a bunch of stuff on set.
They end up making films that make you feel good at the end, and Project Hail Mary makes you feel good at the end. It was amazing seeing the sets for the first time because, as I mentioned, I have this very non-visual imagination. Everything's just kind of blobs and stuff. And so seeing everything brought to life, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I never thought of it like this, but this is, I never thought of it at all. But this is really bringing it to life. It was so cool. I was so stoked when I saw Rocky for the first time. I went to the puppeteer shop and they had him on display there. I was like, oh, this is so cool. Project Hail Mary is about an alien microbe that infests the sun. And it's making the sun get dimmer and dimmer because it's growing over more and more over the sun's surface area. And so humanity has to find a way to solve that problem or we're all going to die. Their dynamic is interesting. They're cooperative right from the start, but they don't have a common language. They can barely communicate, mostly through pantomime and gestures. Bit by bit, they assemble a common language, or at least they learn enough of each other's language to communicate basic concepts. Then they build on that to get the math and the physics and the science down, and then they start expanding their vocabulary. And eventually, they're able to have full conversations with each other and get to the problem solving at hand. Rocky is an alien from the planet Erid, which is in orbit around the star 40 Eridani A. Now, Rocky, as an alien, I had a lot of fun with him. I wanted to kind of go against all the tropes of standard sci-fi, where I wanted to make sure that, for instance, Earth's native environment would be deadly to him, and we couldn't possibly exist in his. He doesn't just look like a person with a little bit of prosthetics on. He looks completely and utterly alien. And the way he sounds, the way he acts, the way he moves is completely alien. And so I had a really fun time with that. I actually started with a real exoplanet that is in orbit around that real star. And then I built up what kind of biosphere could possibly exist on that planet. And that's eventually how I worked my way up to the Iridians, which is Rocky's species. It's a lot of fun. Chris and Phil are amazing at giving personality and life to fictional objects, like food in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, or every character in the Spider-Verse films, or the Lego movie, whatever. You take your pick. They're very, very good at this. So they're absolutely the perfect directors for a film that centers so heavily on an alien that has no eyes, no mouth, and looks like a spider with 5 rocky limbs. My elevator pitch for Project Hail Mary would be that it's a buddy movie with world-shattering consequences. Ryland Grace is a middle school teacher. He's a very gifted scientist, but one who got kind of drummed out of his field by having unpopular opinions that turned out maybe they're true. The initial idea for Project Hail Mary is actually, it's like 5 or 6 unrelated ideas that I had for books that were in my kind of mental ideas file. And then over time, I kind of glued them together and sanded off the edges, and it turned into Project Hail Mary. But I originally had an idea for
a story about an astronaut who wakes up on a spaceship with amnesia. I had another idea for a first contact story. Then a completely unrelated idea for a story about what if we had a mass conversion based fuel. Bit by bit, those all came together and became Project Hail Mary. Well, coming up with Ryland was a real challenge for me because this is the first time I wrote a book where the main character wasn't just based on me. My earlier books, the main characters are based on aspects of my own personality, but Ryland I created from whole cloth. So I'm always trying to grow as an author. And so for Ryland, I came up with his core personality is he's very conflict averse. He doesn't like being challenged too much. That's why he ultimately left academia to become a really popular middle school teacher. Well, my whole shtick is using accurate science in my stories. And yeah, the biggest challenge of that is explaining it to people who might not understand it or might not even care about it. So I put a lot of work into that. And what I do is I first off say, what is the absolute minimum amount of information I need to give the reader? I don't need to go, just because this stuff is really interesting to me doesn't mean it's interesting to the reader. So I give them the bare minimum information they need just to understand the events of the plot. Then I describe it, usually with some humor, because people will swallow any pill if it's coated in a nice sugary layer of humor. So they'll take any amount of exposition if you're making them laugh. And then the other thing is, and this is the best part, I love it when I hear this from readers, is they say, like, well, it got into sort of a scientific, explanation, and my eyes glazed over a little bit, and I just kind of skimmed until it got back to the plot. Other writers might be kind of offended at that. They're like, oh, I want you to read every word I write. But for me, that is awesome. That means the reader has so much confidence in me that they just assume I'm accurate on all of that science. That their suspension of disbelief is rock solid on that. They don't need it explained to them. They're like, yeah, sure, okay, I believe it, And so when you get to that point with a reader, you're golden. Drew's an awesome guy to work with. I didn't have that much to do with making the screenplay, so he pretty much did it on his own. I had complete confidence because I'd seen what he did with The Martian. He, once he had a rev, he sent it for notes. We all gave notes, myself included. He would call me once in a while he was working on the screenplay to ask for clarifications or on the science or on character, concepts. But for the most part, he just took care of it himself. He's very good at that. I couldn't have asked for a better portrayal of Ryland on screen than Ryan. It's amazing. He did such a fantastic job. He brought layers to the character that I didn't even put into him. My biggest challenge in writing is creating characters with depth and complexity and nuance. And I do my best, but I still have a way to go with that. Ryan took what I began with Ryland and ran with it and made Ryland a deep and complicated and really great character. So what's awesome is all the work Ryan did to make Ryland such a good character, I'm going to get credit for, even though Ryan was the one who did the work. But that's fine with me. Sandra absolutely nailed Strat as a character, all the way down, not just to the way she acted, but the nuance and the vocal inflection that I imagined. I did have some specific ideas for how Strat spoke, how thick her accent was, what sorts of intonations she would put on words. And I never talked to Sandra about it, but she just went straight to that. And so it was absolutely perfect as far as I'm concerned. The sets were amazing. And I saw the Hail Mary and I thought, wow, okay. So of course in the studio, unlike within the context of the story, it's all just one big ship. In the studio, they're broken up into, okay, here's the cockpit over here, here's the tunnel over there, there's the bedrooms over there. So it was kind of, here's the lab. And it was kind of interesting going around trying to figure out, okay, wait, how does this connect to that? So it was hard for me on the soundstage to figure out what the geometry of the whole ship was. But each individual room, I'm like, wow, this looks great. This looks fantastic. I especially love the cockpit. I'm a sucker for lots of blinking lights and gack. Phil and Chris did an incredible job. I've loved everything they've made. And wow, just watching them work on this project. They were always saying like, Jesus, this is hard. This is the hardest movie we've ever had to make. But to me, this was the only time I've ever seen them work, as on a project that I was on. And I was like, wow, it seems like they're handling it just fine. So I don't know. I imagine it was very difficult for them. It was a large and complicated shoot, but they from an external observer's perspective, they just handled everything so beautifully. So when I was creating Rocky, I started from the ground up, literally. I started from the planet. 40 Eridani does have a planet orbiting it, and for the 40 Eridani AB, I think is what it's called, but it's the closest planet to the star. And so I started with that. And I said, okay, that's where this alien species is going to come from. I need there to be an active biosphere there. I need there to be liquid water. The only way to have liquid water that close to a star is to have a really, really thick atmosphere, so the boiling point of water is really high. Okay, so it's really hot and there's a really thick atmosphere. Then I knew that. The only way you get to keep a really thick atmosphere if you're a planet really close to your star is by having a really, really powerful magnetic field. The way planets have magnetic fields is they spin. That's why Earth has a magnetic field. The faster you spin, the more powerful your magnetic field. So Erid spins really fast. It has a day that's about 6 hours long. That's what it needed to have a magnetic field that would protect that atmosphere. So now I know it has a short day. So bit by bit, these requirements came through on what the planet would have to be like to have liquid water and therefore life. And then I built up a biosphere from there. I said, well, sunlight's not even going to reach the surface, so how do I make that work? Well, it's kind of like an ocean and stuff. Well, after they see the movie, I just hope that the audiences feel good. I never have a message. I never have a moral. I'm not trying to change anybody's belief on anything. I just want to entertain. And I admit I'm a bit of a, pie in the sky, head in the clouds optimist. I really do think humanity is a pretty cool thing. And so I'd like people to come out of there feeling like good about humanity or good about the world, maybe just a little bit. I'm so happy with the way things have turned out. Obviously, I'm really glad that people like the book so much, and I really think they're going to love the movie. I think it's going to be a big hit. And yeah, I hope it becomes kind of part of the zeitgeist for a little while where people talk about it or have running jokes. I look forward to memes.
The Martian sort of primed me for a Hail Mary, but at the same time, my whole career has been navigating complicated tones. And so I think I'm just attracted to that. And it's why I responded so much to Andy in the very beginning. I mean, for The Martian, they sent it to me as an ebook. It was still just chapter by chapter. It hadn't been published. And I immediately said, let's spend the next 3 years working on this. And it's because Andy has such soul in his writing. It's because he does navigate the tones. The comedy and the drama are one. It's not like either or. It's all part of the larger message.
Rocky's an alien from the 4D Eridani star system. I intended for people to like Rocky, of course, because he's the second most important character in the story, but I had no idea how overwhelmingly popular Rocky was going to be. People would send me fan mail saying like, hey Andy, I love the book, I love your stuff, I would die for Rocky. And then people halfway through the book say like, if anything happens to Rocky in the rest of this book, I will come to your home and kill you. And so just the joy and love that people have for Rocky really surprised me. I guess because this was all unintentional. He's just such a good-hearted guy. He is just such a loyal and friendly person as a personality, as a soul goes. And I think also people in their mind almost equate him to being kind of like a very intelligent dog. And so all the love people have for dogs also ends up translating over to Rocky.
I'm admittedly an Andy Weir superfan. So it had all the hallmarks of what Andy does well, the sort of hard science fiction mixed with intimate humanity. That's sort of his sweet spot that I just live and breathe for. And yet it felt new. It felt like, I've never seen this before. Andy and I have a very good working relationship that we honed over the course of The Martian. And we sort of start with big picture conversations. I sort of say to him my thoughts and what I think we need to do to bring it to life on screen. Andy's usually very receptive. And then I sort of go away for a while and write the first draft. I say, Andy, you don't want to see how the sausage is made for this first draft. Then once we do that, I bring it to him, and then we're in constant communication for the whole course of the movie, just to make sure he always keeps us honest. He doesn't let us go off the rails, and he's really understanding of the things that you need to change to dramatize the film. One of the things we learned on The Martian was that we don't have to dumb down the science, and that we were all terrified on The Martian. We thought we were going to have to, I shouldn't say dumb down, we thought we would have to simplify the science for a general audience to understand, but we didn't. And we thought, let's just see what happens when we test this movie. And what we found was the opposite, is the audience loved it. They loved that the science was complicated and challenging. And even if they did not understand it, they liked the idea that it was something they could aspire towards. And we went into Hail Mary with that knowledge. We went into Hail Mary knowing we don't have to simplify this. We can do what's right for the story, and we can embrace the very thing that makes this special, which is the hard science of it. And I think that helped. We had the wind at our back. And so really it was less about simplifying the science and more just making sure that we put the best story on the screen. Project Hail Mary is the story of two disparate individuals from either ends of the galaxy coming together, and through science, teaching, empathy, and compassion, work together to save the universe. The central problem of Project Hail Mary is we discovered that our sun is slowly dying. And as you can imagine, that's bad for the world. What we discover is that it's actually being eaten slowly but surely by an organism, life, and that organism is actually spread throughout the galaxy. So we have to work together as a planet to solve that very crisis. Yeah, truthfully, as a screenwriter, part of the fun of doing a space movie is you get to play with spaceships, right? I mean, that's like, it is, we do boil ourselves down to like some base elements. And so one of the things that was fun is like, we get to build a spaceship. And it's a credit to Chris and Phil's vision that they made this spaceship that's wholly unique, that feels like it is grounded in the science of our world, and yet is almost a living, breathing character of the film. Very early on in the process, we started referring to Hail Mary almost as a character rather than as a ship. And that really helped inform how we would approach this and find the sort of, I don't want to say humanity, but find the elements of Hail Mary that made her special. There's a tendency, especially in science fiction, to jump way too far ahead into the future, right? And we wanted to feel like this feels like now. And yes, there are AI, obviously, but that has limitations in terms of this problem. And so we kind of had to find that right balance of what would they really do? What would they really do to put on this ship rather than what would they aspire to? What would it feel like right now? And we sort of had to thread that needle throughout the process. Ryland Grace is a brilliant professor who, through his own limitations, has been disgraced in the academic community. He is now a school teacher and sort of at peace with the idea that his own actions have led him here. And yet you can always sense that there's something inside of him that is reaching for higher. The approach to Hail Mary is that we wanted to always be rooted in humanity. We wanted to feel like what a character would be going through. We didn't want to skip those parts. In movies like this, you're constantly skipping those parts to get to the plot. And we sort of said, like, the point of this is to understand the humanity. That's the point. And so we have to live in it. And sometimes living it means not talking about it. That's what's really hard. Like the challenge of this movie, and it really was a conversation between me, Andy, Ryan, Chris, and Phil of like, how do we find what feels honest for all of us between writers, directors, actor, and triangulate that. And so that was a multi-year conversation. And so a lot of it was we didn't want to use the usual crutches. The character, it did not feel like the character wants to stop and talk to the camera a lot and tell you what he's feeling. And so as a result, he's playing it internally. And so we had to really be thoughtful about, okay, he's playing this internally. How do we let the audience know? And that's where you need Ryan Gosling. Like, I can't do that. Like, Chris and Phil can't do that. Andy can't do that. You need Ryan to do it. And that's what makes him so special, is what he can do without dialogue, is let you in on what he is going through without saying these things. And so we were constantly pulling back. It's because once you put the camera on Ryan, you realize, he can do this without my words. Ryan Gosling was on as a producer, and before I even said yes. And part of the reason I said yes was knowing that I had him to write towards, because I don't know anybody else who could have played this part. There's a lot of wonderful actors out there, but this character needed this composition of pain, of humor, of intelligence, of humanity at its core. We spend a lot of the movie with just him by himself, right? You need an actor who can hold the camera and hold the screen and show you all of these things so that we didn't want to tell you what was happening. We wanted you to feel what he was going through. This movie is about empathy. And so we needed an actor who oozed empathy in everything he did. And that's Ryan Gosling. So as a screenwriter, there's no greater safety net. You just write whatever you write and you trust, oh, Ryan's going to make this work. I think the thing that attracted me to doing this movie was that it presents as a space adventure. It presents as a disaster movie. And then about a third of the way through, it turns into this whole other thing, right? It almost becomes this intimate character study between two individuals. And that was thrilling to me. Like the very challenge of the movie was the thing that made it exciting, which is this is a movie about how do you communicate? How do you have empathy and compassion for something that is nothing like you, that is not remotely like you? How do you find those areas of common ground? Part of the approach was dictated by the book. The book sort of jumps back and forth, but part of what I loved about the book is that it presents as a very sort of standard flashback structure. So you think at the beginning of the movie, maybe for the first half, that we're just watching the story of how we got here, right? Hopefully, what starts to happen towards the back half of the movie is you realize, oh, there's more method to this madness. And we're actually showing a character journey that is happening with the juxtaposition of who you were versus who you are. And that juxtaposition becomes the larger point. Because when you're dealing with who is this person and what does it mean to be selfless, you first have to examine the self. And so if you look at the flashbacks, you're looking at the former self, and then we're juxtaposing that with the current self. And so slowly but surely, the hope is, at least, that you're letting go of the plot of the flashbacks and starting to focus more on the emotions of the flashbacks and the meaning of who did Ryland Grace used to be versus you're starting to look at the difference between who was Ryland Grace and who is Ryland Grace and who does Ryland Grace want to be. And that is the third act of the movie. Those three things sort of coming together at the same time. Sandra Hüller plays Ava Stratt. When I was writing the movie, I was terrified we weren't going to find Stratt. Because I knew we needed to find an actress who the whole world would put in charge of this, right? That you believed it immediately from when she walks through the door, right? And she is going to be the person that's making some very, very difficult decisions that on their surface feel cruel, that could feel heartless. And the only way that was going to work is if you found an actress who could embody the humanity so that you felt the humanity right under the surface of those hard decisions. The true joy of making this film is watching Chris and Phil, the crazy wizards that they are, sort of bring this movie to life. They're visionaries, they're geniuses, and they're delightful human beings. If you want to know what they're like, it's what's on the screen. That's what's on. They're putting themselves on the screen. They are all of the things that you're seeing when you watch this movie. They're funny. They're delightful. They're geniuses. They're silly. They're human. They're emotional. I don't know. I say this with respect to all of the wonderful directors out there. There's nobody else that could have brought this movie to life. Not like this. I remember sitting in meetings when they were designing the Hail Mary, and they said, no, we're going to make this thing for real. There's a lot of this movie that you could do by just putting an actor against a green screen. You could do it. And Chris and Phil were constantly saying, no, we're not doing that. We're going to make this movie real. We're going to give the performers and the audience something real to cling to so that you can be in that situation. And I would think that sounds good, but that's going to be really expensive and really hard. That's going to be really hard. And they're like, we're doing it anyway. And thank God they did. There was no easy day on Project Hail Mary. Every day was challenging, but that's also what made it fun. I hope fans of the book will love this movie. I feel comfortable that they will, because I don't say yes when I'm adapting to something unless I love it. I've learned that if I love it, that love will come through in the work. I consider myself a fan. Like, first and foremost, I am an Andy Weir fan. I am a fan of the book. And so I consider it my job to figure out how do I dramatize the work. I do not consider it my job to change the work. It's more about how do I make the best version of the book on screen. That's how I approach screenwriting. When you read Rocky on the page, he's delightful. But when you step back and you realize, oh, we have to make this real, he gets terrifying. I don't mean terrifying as a character, I mean logistically terrifying. He is a rock with no face. When you have no eyes, you have no mouth. These are things that, when you're dealing with aliens, are your fallbacks. Look at the great aliens of the time. They either have a really prominent eyes or a prominent mouth. Rocky didn't have either. And when you look at that, you're like, how are we going to make this work? And truthfully, I did not know the answer. However, I knew that our directors could. Like, if there was anyone that could do it, Chris and Phil, with their background in animation and their background of making things come to life, they could figure it out. And the truth is, it took years. It took years to figure out the right balance of characterization. It took our puppeteer, James. Like, we needed to find the performer so that we could find the character. And it was not easy, but they pulled it off. We actually get to see the sort of rough, I shouldn't call them rough, we actually get to see the sort of human edges of what saving the world looks like. That it's not this sort of march towards the next action set piece. It's, oh no, this is what science looks like. Science is getting aluminum foil from Home Depot and figuring out how to make an experiment because no one's ever done this before. And so you just need to sort of roll up your sleeves and get into it. And so that relationship between Ryan and Carl, between Ryland and Carl, sort of spoke to the bigger soul of the movie, which is, this is about people connecting, no matter where they come from, no matter what their job is. They're there to connect, and those connections bring the solutions to our problems. Chris and Phil knew early we wanted to do as much of this character practically as we could. Now, obviously, there's some things that you can't do practically, but they said early, no, let's try to do it for real. And it was a lengthy process, but they found James. When James Ortiz came in, we suddenly all felt like, oh, this might work. We may actually have a Rocky now. And one of the things that's was thrilling to watch on set was James work that puppet, because I, who am used to this and know it's all fake, right? I would forget. I would watch that puppet and start to forget that it was a puppet. I would just believe it was real, and Ryan Gosling was just acting with an actual spider crab. Like, that's the level of talent that James and his team brought to. It's not just about the movement, it's about the emotion. Like, it's also in James's voice. It's in the performance. He treated it like a character, and watching that come to life was frankly one of the most amazing things that I've seen. The addition of Rocky, the addition of the sort of intergalactic spectacle that we were in, felt new and like something I have not seen through the lens of Andy Weir, so I was thrilled.